Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a highly structured, completely impartial look at the political strategy of Senator Pauline Hanson and the One Nation Party. We're going to break down her recent super extensive interview on Sky News to decode the exact playbook her party is using to gear up for a rapid succession of upcoming Australian elections. Now, whether you totally agree with her politics or completely oppose them, understanding the mechanics, the numbers, and the messaging behind minor party mobilization is absolutely essential if you want to grasp today's political landscape. We're pulling information straight from this interview to map out her campaign's focus, and we've distilled the whole thing down for you to make it as efficient and insightful as possible. Okay, let's dive into this. We've organized this sprawling political discussion into 4 distinct sections. First, we'll look at her stance on the ABC. Second, their policies and candidate recruitment. Third, the upcoming election timelines. And finally, the drive for change.
Let's start right off with Section 1, Stance on the ABC. Now, a really huge chunk of this interview focused heavily on Hanson's long-standing grievances with the media. It's actually fascinating how far back this friction goes. She explicitly traces her conflict with the ABC all the way back to 1996, pointing out that she actually banned them from her meetings for 8 months right after she was first elected. In the interview, she gets into specific claims of unfair treatment, arguing that programs like Q&A just constantly set her up with negative questions. She also brought up a recent dispute where she claims the ABC unfairly named a low-level staffer, something she insists they'd literally never do for a major party office. For her, it really cements this view of deep institutional bias.
And this brilliantly illustrates how all of those grievances translate into actual political policy, because she isn't just venting, she actually has a split approach to the broadcaster. On one hand, she argues for completely defunding the $1.3 billion mainstream ABC, saying they should sell off their properties and move to a subscription model. But on the flip side, she explicitly supports keeping full funding for rural and regional ABC radio, saying they actually do a fair job for their local communities. So, it's a highly targeted approach that completely separates the urban operations from the regional services.
Moving right along to Section 2, Policies and Candidate Recruitment. During the interview, Hanson was challenged on a pretty frequent criticism that One Nation is just a policy-free zone that makes a lot of noise but lacks concrete ideas. Well, she counters that directly with this number, 29. Hanson points out that One Nation currently has 29 distinct, fully detailed policies sitting publicly right on their website. She argues for total transparency, noting that these cover major national issues like gas, migration, and taxation. She even threw down a challenge to the major parties, claiming that voters just aren't going to find that same level of upfront policy availability from Labor or the Liberals during the off-season. She wants to bring the public along before the actual campaign even kicks off. But hey, policies need people to actually champion them, right? Which brings us to recruitment. Just look at this metric, 1,100. That is the exact number of candidate expressions of interest One Nation has received for the state of Victoria alone. That is a massive volume of applications for a minor party to vet and process for just a single state election. It shows some pretty significant grassroots mobilization.
And when we zoom out to look at the national picture, that number jumps to 1,500 expressions of interest for the next federal election. 1,500! The interviewer actually asked her how she makes sure she's getting people she'd be willing to get in the foxhole with, and Hanson confirmed they are actively vetting this massive pool right now to find the right people to cover seats all over the country.
So, who exactly are these 1,500 people? Hanson was super eager to detail the professional diversity here. She listed off barristers, doctors, surgeons, average tradies, people with serious business acumen, and folks from diverse cultural backgrounds. To really drive the point home, she shared this anecdote about being approached by a university professor at the Sydney airport. Apparently, he privately agreed with her that the core issues lie within the universities, telling her he'd stand with her if it weren't for his current job. From Hanson's perspective, this proves that everyday people who feel stifled are finally stepping up to join her movement.
Okay, on to Section 3, Upcoming Election Timelines. So, how exactly are all these vetted candidates going to be deployed? Well, Hanson and her team are staring down a rapid-fire chronological battlefield. The immediate focus is the Victorian election in November. Hot on the heels of that is the New South Wales election in March of next year. And all of this basically serves as the runway for the ultimate test, the federal election, which is still to be determined. It's a relentless schedule that is going to require some serious organizational stamina. Let's focus on that first hurdle in Victoria for a second. The interviewer pointed out that while One Nation is pulling pretty well down there, the leadership seat is currently just an empty chair. Interestingly, Hanson revealed she already has a specific person in mind for that crucial role. But she noted she's keeping her powder dry, meaning she is strategically waiting for the absolute perfect moment in the coming weeks to announce this leader to the public to maximize media impact before the November vote.
Finally, let's hit Section 4, the drive for change.
Organizing thousands of candidates across consecutive elections takes an unbelievable amount of energy. So what's actually fueling this effort? The answer starts with 30. When asked about her stamina and how she handles the intense media scrutiny of a national campaign, Hanson pointed out that she's been driving this political movement for 30 years. She insists her energy levels are just as high as ever because she's never backed away from her morals or principles over those 3 decades. For her, she says it isn't about her name, it's about following through on a decades-long commitment.
So the crucial point here is the sheer urgency she feels regarding the current government. Hanson states unequivocally that if Labor is reelected with a majority, we are in for one hell of a ride, and the damage to the country will be irreversible. This idea is essentially her primary justification for needing everyday grassroots Australians to step up and run for office right now. She believes the country is on a precipice, and she's framing these upcoming elections as the last chance for the change her supporters want. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question. We've seen the 29 policies. We've seen the thousands of candidate expressions of interest. We know the relentless timeline stretching from Victoria to the federal election. The question now is, how will this intense minor party mobilization and aggressive anti-establishment messaging actually impact the upcoming sequence of Australian elections? Are these grassroots numbers going to translate into actual power at the ballot box? It is absolutely going to be a fascinating dynamic to watch unfold. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep these data points in mind as we head into election season.